Hey everybody, this is Mike LaPone from Symphony X and Mike LaPone's Silent Assassins, and this is SAGAS.
Hi, my name is Josh Freeman. I run DWI Clothing. We do a lot of stuff with SAGAS Metal Podcast. I have a store with all of their merch, exclusive. There's a US, UK, and Australian store where you can get any of their merch. There's going to be new designs coming up pretty soon. Also in the US store, for right now, I have this shirt right here, the original DWI shirt with the print on the back that says "Deal with it." I also have one of the better shirts that's sold so far, the Nap City shirt. And this one, my wife really likes, the Po Daddy shirt. All of these are available on the US store only for right now. But if you're a fan of SAGAS Metal Podcast, if you're a fan of any of these designs, go check it out. Go check out the link. I've set up 3 stores, so shipping is cheaper and faster, depending on where you live. And if you guys can get to 500 subscribers on the SAGAS Metal Podcast YouTube page, we can do that even bigger and even better.
What's going on, everybody? This is Corbin, the Serpent Tongue Skipwith, and I'm here with a very special guest. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I am Jeff Ignatowski. I am the owner of Scorpion Lair Games and the creator of the best-selling true crime game of all time, Killers the Card Game.
Nice. Thank you so much again for taking the time. I've been trying to set this up for a little bit, and yeah, it's finally happening, and I couldn't be happier.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited.
Yes, so am I. Finally, we're going to have one of the SAGAS sponsors on the podcast. So that's really cool. All right. So, let's go back to the beginning. How did you find yourself doing this kind of thing? Where did your fascination with serial killers and all this start? I just want to know from the start, how did you get into it?
So really, I've been fascinated all my life. I grew up in the middle of a bunch of true crime, right? I grew up right outside of Philadelphia on the East Coast. So I'm very, very much an East Coast guy. I live in the Midwest now, but I grew up on the East Coast and I grew up in the hood. So I grew up right in the middle of all that. And my dad had all of these stories because he had met Manson in the early 60s before the murders. So I grew up with stories about him talking about him meeting Manson, and he met him at a park. He met him. He actually met a couple of the girls first, and none of the girls that were involved in the murders, but some of the early Manson family member women. And, of course, at the time he was traveling around the country. He was often pimping his women out. And so these girls approached my dad and said, "Hey, do you want to go to a party?" And my dad said, "Hell yeah, you got any drugs?" And the girls were like, "Yeah, but we got to ask Jesus." And so they took my dad to a park bench, and Manson had come out of the hotel there, and he had sat down and was playing his guitar. And he talked to the girls a little bit. He said a few words to my dad, not very much. But then he forbade the girls to talk to my dad anymore. So they would not talk to him after that. So it was not a good meeting. My dad was about 6'2", about 220 at the time, pretty athletic guy. And Manson is all of 5'4" and 140 pounds, right? And so he was not interested in my dad being part of it. So my dad said, "Well, that's fine. Fuck you. We know where the party's going to be at tonight." And he was going to take his buddy and go back to the party and rob Manson of his drugs. Of course, he didn't know his name then. He just knew that they called the guy Jesus. And so, a couple years later, when all of the news reports are going on about these Sharon Tate murders, my dad is watching the TV and he's like, "Holy shit, that's the guy we met in the park." And so he calls up his buddy and he's like, yeah, that's the dude. So, of course, throughout my childhood, that was a huge thing we used to talk about all the time. Of course, in my household, we called him Cousin Charlie. And if you have our serial killer kids cards, one of the Manson cards is Cousin Charlie, right? So I had to do that. But yeah, so that was one of the stories from my childhood. My dad also knew several of the prominent mafia figures in Philadelphia. Half of my family is Italian. I am not Italian at all. I'm half Filipino, a quarter Polish, and a quarter German. But a bunch of my family is married in Italian. One of my uncles is, he's deceased now, but he was Uncle Sonny, right? So I have a whole Italian side of the family. And, we had a primo as one of my great uncles. And, so anyway, they were all fronts for the mob in the early 70s. So I grew up in this whole culture where we were not able to be part of the mafia, obviously, because we were not Italian, but all of us wanted to be, right? We grew up watching The Godfather and Scarface but I grew up in the middle of that culture. My dad was good friends with Angelo Bruno. And so there was a story when I was a kid. My uncle worked for Tandy Leather Company. He was a supervisor for Tandy. And they had an Italian guy that was working there, and they were trying to fire him. And he claimed that he was connected and that he was going to bring a bunch of the mob guys from New York there and kill everybody. So my uncle, who had no affiliation with anything, he was a very straight guy, went to my dad and said, hey, a bunch of the guys in Philly. Can you go and find out about this guy for me? So my dad went to Philly. He had a sit down with Angelo. And, about a week later, they found out that the guy had nothing to do with it, that he was not affiliated or anything. So they end up firing the guy, getting rid of him. Of course, then my dad owes a favor to Angelo. But 3 weeks later, Angelo gets his head blown off. And you see that very famous picture of him sitting there with his mouth wide open in his sedan. So, that was just a couple weeks after my dad had a sit down with Angelo. My dad knew, why can't I think of his name now? Oh, the Chicken Man, Philip Testa. So he knew Testa, who took over after Angelo. And then he also knew Nicky Scarfo, who ended up getting rid of Testa and taking over after that. And Scarfo was crazy. Of course, he's still in prison. I think he's still alive. Yeah. But he was he was the madman. He would go around and whack everybody. So like I grew up in that culture. So I've always been around it my whole life. And so when I was a kid, I got really, really fascinated with the mafia. And I started, actually, I have a book here. Where's it at? It's not right up on my shelf, but it's a book on Meyer Lansky. It's actually called Lansky. I forget who wrote it, but I grew up reading that book. I would get it out of the library. I would walk down to the Wilmington Library and get it out once every couple of weeks and read it. And it was just fascinating that this Jewish guy comes in and he's Lucky Luciano's right-hand man. And he basically figures out how to create the commission, which is what runs all of organized crime in Philadelphia through the 50s and 60s and 70s. And it's just amazing. So I have a lot of connections with all of that stuff as a kid. So that's really where my interest started out. Come to find later on, you wonder if, what's his name? Richard Kuklinski, of course, who's also a Polak, right? Who is not an Italian, was the guy that was contracted by Gotti to do a bunch of hits. He had his hands, well, possibly, if you believe what Kuklinski said, he had a part in the what is his name? Paul, the one that Gotti had killed, his boss. I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, anyway, when they killed him at the steakhouse there. But anyway, there's the belief that Kuklinski was part of that hit. And you wonder, Gotti wanted control and ultimately got control of Atlantic City. It's why they killed Angelo Bruno, because New York wanted control of Atlantic City. Atlantic City had been run for 30, 40 years by Angelo Bruno. And it's believed that Gotti is the one that had him killed. They say that he used his own underboss to do it, but who knows? Maybe they used Kuklinski. So maybe my connection with Kuklinski is much closer than I think. I don't know. He was only in Jersey, which was only like 60 miles from me. So who knows?
Speaking about the mafia, two questions I want to ask you. Number one, do you believe? I'm not sure if you've seen the movie, The Irishman, but do you believe Jimmy Hoffa got taken out by the mafia in The Irishman?
So what's really funny about that? This is no bullshit. This weekend, I was in Chicago, and I had one of Jimmy Hoffa's nephews was at my booth, and he was flipping through the book that I have with all the killers. He was like, I want to know if my family's in here. And I said, well, who's your family? He was like, Jimmy Hoffa was my uncle. And I was like, no shit. So I met Jimmy Hoffa's nephew this weekend. Yeah. And he said he was going to send me a bunch of pictures. He was going to email me a bunch of pictures of Jimmy and like when he was a kid, like his family had. And then who else was it? There was somebody else that I met this weekend. But yes, I believe the mafia had something to do with it. I'm sure they made him disappear. There's a good possibility that, he's in the foundation of some building somewhere. They're never going to find him. And even if they did, how would they identify him now? Right. Yeah. DNA is around, but it depends on what it's in. Right. If he's in concrete, they'll probably be able to pull some DNA if they find the body. But the possibility of that is so slim now. Right. So it's been 60 years.
Yeah, that was a good movie, Irishman. And the second question, and I hope this is true, like it would sadden me to no end if this was all bullshit, but do you think that Frank Sinatra was connected with the mafia? I want to believe that he was badass.
He was for sure. He was for sure. And the stuff that was written into The Godfather about, the New York mob getting Frank Sinatra's, in the movie, it's, I can't think of his name now to save my life. Anyway, the guy who basically plays the Frank Sinatra character, they help him get his job. They put the horse head in the bed and all that shit. That's actually based on a true story. It was very, very well known that Frank Sinatra was connected with the mob, and they helped him out a number of times to get jobs and things like that and movie roles. So yeah, he was well connected. I think one of his, he was a nephew of somebody that was really, really high up in one of the organizations. So yeah, he was definitely well taken care of.
Yeah, and he died of old age, didn't he? Sinatra, 98.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he was taken care of. Yeah. Like, see, it's interesting because you hear numbers. Like the most common thing I've heard, and obviously, who knows unless you're part of that. But the main thing I've heard is he paid 10% of his overall amount to the mafia in exchange for immunity, pretty much. In exchange for yeah. So that's what I've heard, which is a fair deal if you're Sinatra.
Hell yeah. Well, you figure throughout his life, God, the guy lived, he had the Rat Pack and, he had all of these things he did. He lived the life of, a rock star, right? So this guy, he had the best of everything. Give up 10%. Hell yeah. And you got protection from the mob. Nobody can hurt you. Yeah, it's a good deal for sure.
I'm kind of jealous. That would have been a cool life. So you obviously, you had this upbringing around pretty much serial killers and mafia. So when did you start from that? When was the first time you were like, all right, let me make something or create something with this fascination that I have? When did that start?
So, let me backtrack even before that. Right. And, so I talks on serial killer psychology. I have a couple shows that I do on serial killers and, murder and stuff like that, where I talk about all these different things. I often take it from a very unique perspective because I grew up very, very similar to a lot of the different people that we talk about all the time. I had a pretty difficult childhood. I grew up in a situation with a lot of abuse. My mom was very, very abusive towards me. And so, I grew up with all of that shit. And I really, really struggled for a long time being able to connect with other people. And so I always wondered why I never chose to go the way that a lot of these people that I study chose to go, right? They chose to give in to some of those darker desires. And, I remember as a kid, hearing voices and having the auditory hallucinations and shit. And it was constant that I wanted to kill other people. So, I never really understood why it was that I was able to not give in to that, not go down that lifestyle. So it's always been an intriguing question to me to figure out why that happens. Like, why is it that some people, even though they have the same impulses, they struggle with the same bullshit going through their head all the time, why can some people not give in and other people do? And I don't know that there's an actual answer to that, because I believe it's different for everybody. And it really, really depends on your experiences in life and how your brain translates those. If you, like, I worked in a prison for some time too. So I worked with inmates and stuff, and watching how some people's brain processes information is fascinating, because some people, things will happen to them and it's always the black cloud, right? Doesn't matter what it is. The best fucking thing could happen. They get a new job, they get a new car, but it's always miserable because they choose to view the world that way. And until they decide to look at it a different way, it'll never change for them. Everything will always be miserable. And it sucks to live that way. So you wonder why it is that people get that lens of the world, and then other people can change that lens. So a couple of years ago now, I became friends with Nico Klaus, right? He's the Vampire of Paris. Really, really great artist, and also a cannibal and a killer. Went to jail for it. So I didn't know that when I started talking to him. I started talking to him because of his artwork. And so I ended up buying his art book and everything. I got it. And then I listened to True Crime Horror Story, where they did an interview with him. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, me and this guy grew up like identical. Like, we struggle with the same shit. Like, when he was talking, I was like, dude, this is me. So me and Nico talked after that. And I messaged him and I said, hey, man, we got to talk. I need to understand your perspective, and I need to match it up with mine, because I don't understand why I didn't do what you did. Because he grew up and he, had his own brand of Satanism and everything. I did the same thing when I was a kid. From the time I was about probably 11 until about 16, I believed that I was talking to Satan. So, and he was influencing me to do things. So I had my own brand of devil worship, I guess, when I was a kid. But why didn't I decide to follow through with that? Now, there were a lot of things that I did during that time that I believed were because of that. So, and then, 10 years after that, right? Yeah, I guess about 10 years after that, I pastored for the next 10 years. So I was standing up in church, proclaiming all these things, talking to people. And so, it's been wild. Like, I've done all of these different things, and all of them have been to figure out who I am as a person and how it is that I can affect the world around me. And what I've found is I find it extremely important to educate other people and get them to understand that there are really fucked up people all around us. And if we don't understand and we can't recognize those things, there is danger everywhere. you don't have to live that way. And honestly, if you live that way, you're at more risk because you're more apt to be a victim. But awareness is key. Understanding why people think the way that they do, how they think, the different warning signs that are out there that often are very, very difficult to see. For example, Gacy. Who would have believed beforehand that he had 26 bodies in his crawl space? Nobody. Everybody thought he was a decent guy. He ran his business and everything. Nobody had any idea. So it's amazing that they can cover that up so well. And then you see other guys like Richard Chase, who was clearly fucking bananas out of his mind and couldn't stay on his medication and was talking all kinds of wild, crazy shit. So I think it's vitally important that we understand that. Now, getting that back to the original question, that's why I created the game to begin with. Yeah. And so about 4 years ago, I have always created games, right? Yeah. I had never made anything for like mass market. But when I was 8 years old, I actually have it here. Actually, it's right next to me. I'll show this shit to you. So this box has the first game that I ever created. It was a boxing game. And we took these boxing cards, these KO boxing cards that my dad had in it. We had a corner store when I was growing up. But we took those cards and I made a boxing game where we would roll dice and you would get a knockout, a TKO, and all that stuff. And I literally forced my friends to play this game for hours every day. And, it was always the joke that, they all hated playing it. And it was really kind of dumb, but they couldn't whoop me. So it didn't make any difference. We all played it anyway. So when I was a kid, we were playing that game at 8 years old on my grandfather's steps. And now, 35 years later, I'm at a head shop with my son and we're there and he's asking me, he said, "Dad, buy me a pack of cards." And it's funny because this happened just this weekend. I took him to Chicago with me this weekend and he wanted some like 80s Batman cards and shit. And they're like $5 a pack. And I was like, no way in hell. I could go get those for like 50 cents. You're not buying $5 a pack cards. Not happening this weekend. But anyway, when we were in the head shop, he picked up these cards and I was like, "Oh, what cards are they?" They were those 1992, 93 true crime cards, right? Where they had the pictures on the front, the artwork, and on the back it had a little bio. And I said, "Oh man, I remember I had those when I was a kid. I had a whole set of them when I was a kid. How much are they?" And he said, "They're $6 a pack." I said, "Son, you ain't getting your $6 pack cards. I'm not buying those cards for you." "Come on, Dad, come on." I was like, "Fuck no, you're not getting those cards, son. Put them back." He's like, "But Dad," I'm like, "No." I said, "Listen, I could make those for you."
Yeah.
On the way home, I got an idea and I was like, "Oh shit, I can make this into a game." Mm-hmm. I got home and I took about an hour and a half and I sketched out a basic plan of what I wanted the game to be. And it is pretty close now to what it was when I first sketched it out 3.5 years ago now, maybe 4 years ago. And so that was really the start of the game. And then I talked to a bunch of people and a bunch of people are like, "You're fucking out of your mind, Jeff. Nobody, you're going to get canceled. This is right in the middle of COVID. It's right in the middle of all of our cancel culture and all of this bullshit going on." And they're all like, "Jeff, it's never going to work. It's never going to work." And I was like, "Okay, we'll see." You just take it and you run it up the flagpole and you see what happens. If it ends up being great, great. If it ends up being shit, it's shit. But you never know unless you take a chance. So you fucking do it. And so I did it. I made the game. I bought, a couple units just to test it out and to play it. And I really, really, really liked it. And even to this day, I've sold now over 2,000 units of games, mainly all killers, all over the world in like 8 or 9 different countries now. I've got like 40 different retail outlets that I sell in. And it's like, I still am waiting for those people to tell me this fucking game sucks. Like it's so dumb. And I have yet to ever have anybody say that. Everybody gets the game and they're like, dude, this is the fucking coolest thing ever. And part of that is because there's nothing else out there like it, number one. Number two, there are very, very few people that are willing to go as far as I am. Mm-hmm. And so, like, one of the reasons why we can't get a mainline distributor, and I've talked to all the big distributors and all the big promotion companies, is because we have children in the game. But I always believed that it would be inauthentic if we don't talk about the real shit, right? Yeah. It's important to me to be realistic. I think you take away from the authenticity and the telling the real historical stories when you take away the realism. And there were plenty of killers that only killed children. Albert Fish is one of them. You know, there are a lot of the females that killed their own children, or baby farmers that killed multiple children. So it's like, to leave that out would be leaving out part of history. And I think it is, again, if you're trying to spread awareness, it is vitally important to be historically accurate and give people the real story and not give them bullshit. I really, really have a hard time with people that are like, well, you know, you're playing this game and, you know, you're killing people and you're playing as a killer. And I'm like, hold on a second. Y'all let your kids play Friday the 13th, right? Where Jason is whacking off women's heads with an axe, right? And it's very, very graphic, much, much more graphic than my card game could ever be. And I'm like, but that's okay. You realize that Jason and all of those horror figures were all based on real people, right? The idea came because of real killers out there. I would much rather give people real historical shit than teach them some fun little veneer of unrealistic shit. Like, just learn the truth and understand what that is first. And then you can play around with everything else. And saying that, I've had very, very few people that are upset about it. It's mainly online, and it only happens very, very, like, I think I can probably count less than 6 times that I've had people contact me that were upset about it. There was one, they contacted me and I said, y'all play Call of Duty, right? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you realize that game was based on World War I, right? You realize that the people that were in that war were real people too, and they got killed during that war. Like, you're okay with that, but you're not okay with me telling the real stories. There's something wrong with that logic.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense why they're so offended by a card game, but any video game, 99% of video games or TV shows or movies or anime is violent, fantasy violence. Yeah. No, we don't want any of the realism to talk about real people who were really affected by this stuff. Nope, we want to talk about the fantasy stuff that didn't hurt anybody. Like, so what about the people that are influenced by that go out and commit crimes? It's just like the argument always frustrates me. In the United States right now, of course, you guys know it since this is international, right? That we have a huge problem with like mass shootings right now, right? It has become the really, really big thing. Serial killing, really big in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. Now, because of technology and other things, serial killing is much lower on the grand scheme of things. The golden age of serial killers is over.
However, somebody going out and killing 30 or 40 or 50 people at one time and then either committing suicide or having the cops kill them is a very, very real thing in our current society. Now, when we look at all the school shootings, and I may get canceled for this, but it's okay. You know, there is, I believe, and, you know, some people may disagree with me, but I believe that there is a huge correlation between the rise of first-person shooter games and our kids playing first-person shooter games 24 hours a day, and then having no connection with normal people and having no real social skills. And then they go to school, they get pissed off at their friends, and they bring a bunch of guns and shoot people and don't even think twice about it, right? I think that there is a direct connection between those two things. Now, with saying that, I don't believe first-person shooter games are bad. I don't think they should be banned. I love first-person shooter games. However, it needs to be regulated, and not necessarily regulated by like the government, but regulated by their parents. You need to give kids some realism. You need to help them understand and not live in a fantasy world. You cannot allow your children to be babysat by the video games and by the PlayStations and the Xboxes. They need to have real interaction with real people and not live online 24/7. It's one of the reasons why we made Killers a physical game. Like I wanted it to be a game that you had to play with people and interact with other people. I think that is hugely important in a society that continues to get more and more disconnected as we gain better technology.
Yeah, and you know, actually, to that point, you know, because here in Australia, it's very hard to get a gun. Actually, my brother-in-law does have a gun license, but it took years to do that and get that. But I was thinking, like, it's funny because the other week, I was watching my regular. So I'm a huge fan of Japanese pro wrestling. I love their style; it's interesting. And I was watching it live, and the outcome I wanted didn't happen, and I got pissed off. And I was thinking to myself, once I calmed down, I was thinking to myself, if I had a gun, I would just like, who knows what I want to myself. I don't know, like, I was so angry, and I thought to myself, I'm so happy I don't have a gun. Because I don't know what I would have done in that heat of the moment. So like, for me, I know I shouldn't be allowed to have one. I'm glad I can't get one because my mentality, I'm too tempered, I'm too emotionally up and down, and I don't think I can trust myself with a gun. And that's just being honest. So yeah, I do think if someone's in an environment where they might be being bullied, neglected at home and at school, and then like you said, they get pretty much virtual training from COD or Modern Warfare, whatever, and then they go and practice it with a place that has accessible. Because here in Australia, I mean, it happens, guns happen, but you have to bring a knife to school and like knife. But then again, COD doesn't really show knife skill. It does, but it's more gun related. So when if someone here plays COD and gets pissed off, we don't have an access to the gun to bring. We have a knife, kitchen knife that we can bring in, but it's not so I do agree that it definitely it's an environmental thing where parents should have most responsibility, realizing what their kids are up to, what they're playing, and because it's not about the content, it's about how much of it and how, because each person obviously reacts differently to each thing. So some kids like me, I could play video games and feel nothing, but then the person next to me could play first-person shooters, feel the need to replicate it, and then take that to the real world. Yeah.
Well, I think that is, and it's something else that we don't look at a whole lot. Trauma plays a huge factor in that, right? Whatever your personal trauma is, and we all have it, right? Trauma is going to happen. Nobody is going to make it through life trauma-free, but it's often how you deal with that trauma that determines who you become, right? So, like, if you're beat as a kid, that trauma will affect all of your relationships. It will affect everything that you do for the rest of your life. The earlier that you can recognize it and deal with it and figure out what your own personal triggers are, the better you'll be and the more successful you'll be in life because you can navigate that stuff. And whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's, stalking or bullying or whatever, all of those things leave their mark on our lives. None of us are exempt from that. And it becomes, how do we stack those things? Because, BTK talks about it. He talks about this idea of cubing, right? Where we can segment our minds. But I think that another thing happens too when it comes to trauma. Those things stack. And eventually, if there's so much trauma, it will crush you, right? And either you'll learn how to deal with it and you'll become more effective, or you won't. It's why people commit suicide, right? Because there's so much trauma in their life, they often don't feel any reason to continue. They feel like life is not going to be any different, that there is no hope. So there's no reason for them to be part of the world anymore. So they either take themselves out or they take out other people. And so it's fascinating. But I think we need to, especially in this country, we need to really have more trauma awareness and give people better tools to deal with their trauma. And it's really difficult because here in this country, like counseling and stuff is so expensive. You're talking $200 an hour with somebody, and with our rising economy and everything, who the hell can afford that? I know I can't even afford that. And if people are not self-motivated to look into themselves and really get some good introspection, it's very difficult to do that on your own. So there is a huge need for it here in this country. And then it's also very stigmatized, because then people think that, well, like, if you have, bipolar disorder, or you're, ADHD, or you're, on the spectrum, that it's a negative thing. And it just is a thing, right? It's not anything. It's just life. So like, the earlier you can come to a realization that you just need to deal with your shit, it'll be much easier for you.
Yeah. Before I go on to my next topic, I want to talk about something that happened recently, and I don't think we've talked about it on Messenger. I don't think, and it's something as soon as I saw it on the news headline, I was like, "There's something fishy about this," and I want to know your opinion on it. The Unabomber suicide. I reckon that's complete bullshit. The Unabomber, Ted.
So yeah, I didn't realize that they were saying that he might have committed suicide now.
Killed himself. Apparently he hung himself.
Really?
It's like, fuck off.
Okay.
There's no way. Like, that dude was too smart. Yeah. I don't know. I don't buy it.
Yeah, I've got several people that used to correspond with him. Now, he very rarely would write anybody. But I know a few people that would correspond with him from time to time. I wonder what their thoughts are on that, because I don't know. I wasn't aware that it was a suicide. I knew that he had died, but I didn't know why he had died. So that must have just come out recently that he committed suicide. I wonder, because my initial thought on that, he was so upset about the world around him and what the world was becoming, with all of the AI and all of that stuff. If he was able to watch the news, he must have been losing his mind. He must have really believed that everything that he thought was going to happen was happening.
Yeah,
maybe he did. Maybe he hung himself because he just believed that this was not the world for him. I mean, Christ, he was in his 80s, right? He was old. So I don't know if maybe he got some kind of diagnosis, like maybe he had cancer or something. And he was just like, fuck it. I'd rather handle it myself than let this cancer eat away at me. I don't know. I would have loved, as kind of fucked up as this is, I would have loved to have been able to get his take on current society. I would be fascinated to think, or to know, what his thoughts were about the way that the world has changed since he's been in prison. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it would be fascinating to hear that.
Well,
I would love for him.
Oh, sorry, go. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I would love for him to update his manifesto. Of course, he can't now.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say. So I have a few sources that I listen to that like dive deep into like conspiracy theories and rooted stuff, which I don't know if it's true or false most of the time, but apparently while he was in prison, and like I said, don't quote me on this, whoever's listening, I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently he complained often in the prison that his manifesto that was released wasn't his original manifesto, and that it was changed.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
So, it's funny on my old banner. Ted Kaczynski was up on the banner because I'm getting ready to release the Mass Murderers expansion for Killers, and he was like the poster boy for the Mass Murderers expansion for a long time. We've now changed it. It's now Saddam Hussein. But when I had the original banner, I had a girl come up to the booth who was also related to Ted Kaczynski. And so we were talking about that. And it's just, man, you just never know who you're going to meet at these different conventions, family members, people that were associated with some of the victims. I've met them at the booth. It's wild. You just never know.
Yeah. And, the other thing, I mean, obviously, talking to you is always fun, but like whenever anything serial killer comes up, you're the first person I message. I'm like, hey man, and like that's what I love, talking about the Little Stinkers podcast. I love talking about you because I'm like, oh, I just heard about this guy or this girl, and then I give you thoughts. It's a fun dynamic because like I don't really have. I mean, my girlfriend's interested in serial killers, and I talk to her as well. But like, straight away, I'm like, oh, I'm sure Jeff has a cool opinion on this, or has heard about this guy. So it's a fun dynamic back and forth. But I'm curious, obviously, because of your knowledge and and the games you've made and everything. What's your opinion on because the infamous debate, nature versus nurture? You hear it often with serial killers. What do you think it's like 50-50? Do you think it's one or the other?
I think it's both. I don't think you can have one without the other. I think it's I have a friend of mine who literally wrote the book on the psychology of the serial murderer. He is a professor over at, I believe it's Illinois University, but he also used to work. He was a police officer. He worked with the FBI and stuff. Awesome guy named Steve Gianangelo. And so we do a bunch of conventions together and everything. I use his book a lot. If you ever get a chance, they have it up on Amazon. Check it out. It's a great book. If I had it here next to me, it's actually in my car right now because it's in my bin because I carry it to every convention with me. And it is literally the Bible for the psychology of the serial murderer. Awesome guy. But when he talks about it, he talks about how it is actually three different things. It is nature, it is nurture, and there is a trigger that has to happen, right? For it to be serial murder. There are plenty of people out there that might go out and murder one person, get caught, and nothing ever happens. Or they may go back and kill their whole family. Or like the mass murderers will go out and shoot up a whole school or blow up a bus or whatever. But serial murderers are unique in the fact that they have what we always talk about. We talk about that, that they currently, the FBI says that it's 2 or more killings with a cooling off period, right? It used to be 3 or more classifies you as a serial killer or a serial murderer. Now they've reduced that. I personally believe, and I think that Steve would agree with me, is that it needs to be even less than that, right? It should be all about intent, right? Because there are plenty of people out there right now that maybe only kill one person, right? But they get caught after the first kill. And, if they were out, if they were capable, if they had the opportunity, they would certainly continue killing. But they don't because our forensics are good enough now that they can catch them after the first one. Christ, if you drop a hair, if somebody scratches you, if you leave a little blood at the scene, or like most of them, a bunch of semen at the scene, they're going to find you within the first like couple weeks. So as soon as they get those DNA reports back, your ass is in deep shit, as long as they have some record. And now you don't have to go to jail for them to have a record of your DNA. It used to be you had to be a convicted felon, and they took your DNA when you were convicted. Now that's not the case. Now people go on Ancestry.com and, you know, all these different ways that the government is using to get their DNA, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. So, you know, there's a whole lot of conspiracies about that, and, you know, what we think about that, who knows? You know, there's lots of them. I don't know if I even want to dive into that, but you know, there's all kinds of ways that they can get our DNA now. Like fucking that new guy, the Long Island killer, right?
Yeah.
They just caught fucking Rex Howerman, or I think it's Howerman. He was caught because they got his DNA from his fucking his pizza. He threw away his pizza and it still had the crust in there, and they pulled his DNA profile from the pizza. Now, of course, they had been watching him for a year, and I read the 32-page deposition that they had. They have that guy dead to rights. He's in deep shit, at least for the first 4 murders. They've got about 10 other ones that they're trying to say was him, but I don't know if they're going to have enough evidence to make any of those stick. But they definitely got him for 3, if not the 4th one. So, yeah, it's a wild, wild story. And now I don't remember what the original question was.
Nah, it's all good. I always ramble anyway. But I can't help but think, like, and obviously this could just be pure ego and narcissism on my part, but I can't help but thinking, you know, whenever I'm listening to a lot of those serial killer podcast documentary stories, I can't help but think, like, for some of them, at least, like maybe a Jeffrey Dahmer, maybe the Columbine killers. I can't help but think if someone right before or the day before or right before they did it, if someone took them aside and said, "Look, buddy, you look super sad and stressed out. Let's talk. Let's have a hot dog. Let's chill. You know, tell me about your problems. Let's have a beer. You know, let's go play fucking bowling." Which the massacre the school shooters did. They played bowling before going, but you know, it's just like, you know, talk to me first, and then I can't help but think, would that have, you know, just venting, would that have stopped some of them going, "Oh fuck yeah, someone I can tell this to," you know?
So the answer to that is yes, you know, and I know that from personal experience, right? So it stopped me, right? You know, when I was a kid, when I was in grade school, I had a list. Now, I didn't have access to guns at the time. So, you know, maybe it would have changed if I had access to stuff like that. Maybe I would have made a more direct plan. But I had a list of people that I wanted to kill. I had kids that were bullying me and, you know, saying stuff to me, and it caused problems for me that I wanted to get rid of. So, like, you know, it could have easily been me as one of those kids. And, you know, I always think about that when I look at all of the school shooting stories. You know, like, what is it that happened to me that changed that? You know, how is it that, you know, part of it is I had a few friends. I didn't have a bunch, but I had several friends that got me involved in other things. Like when I was like 7 years old, a buddy of mine got me into boxing. His family was a bunch of Puerto Rican boxers. They fought on like Tuesday night fights and all kinds of stuff. So I grew up with all of those guys. And so when they knew stuff was going on, they threw me into the gym and beat the shit out of me. So like that really kind of halted a bunch of my reactions and doing some of that. It's funny because here's another very, very personal story. But I went back and I had dinner. My buddy got married to his high school sweetheart, and we have been friends. They're still married. They have a kid now. but I went back home for their wedding. And I told them if they ever got married, I would come back home. And I hadn't talked to them for probably 10 years at that point, but they sent me an invitation and I went. And it was great. We got to reconnect and hang out. But when we were sitting there, his family was there, of course, for his wedding. And so we were all talking, and they said, they looked at me and they were like, Jeff, we didn't fuck with you when you were a kid because we really believed that you would come back and kill all of us. And I laughed and I said, well, you know why I didn't fuck around? It's because your mom had a belt on the door and she beat the fuck out of all the kids. So I thought if I got out of line, she was whooping my ass next. So I kept myself out of trouble at their house. But it's funny to hear that their perspective was that they knew I had a lot of problems. They knew I had a lot of problems at home. And they were afraid that I was going to explode and be one of those kids. So, it's amazing to go back, 10, 15 years later and hear all of these different perspectives. And, I'm 43 now, and I never believed that I'd live past 16. So I'm on borrowed time, baby. Everything I'm doing now is gravy. Shit.
I love it. So as a parent, like it's interesting because me, for example, I grew up in I'm from New Zealand. My whole family's New Zealand, and Polynesians, most of the time they have a very physical way of parenting, not abusing, but like very physical. It's like kind of the thing that's like, oh, if you get in trouble, I will beat the shit out of you. And then install that fear of like, oh, fuck, if I fuck up at home. Do you think, because to me, I think a small dose of that in parenting can be helpful in installing respect and fear,
for sure,
to not go fuck up. But do you think there can be a negative side to that as well? Or as a parent, do you implement that? Is that something you think is healthy or not healthy?
So I think a lot of people would disagree with me, but I believe that a healthy amount of fear never hurt anybody, right? And I think that we make mistakes when we are so soft and we don't teach our kids the harsh realities of the world, right? Because the world is unforgiving. And nobody out there gives a fuck about whether you've been abused, whether somebody yelled at you yesterday, whether your girlfriend broke up with you. Nobody gives a fuck about that. What they're concerned about is that you go and do your job and you get your work done, right? So I think that when you don't allow your kids to understand that truth, I think that they are not equipped to deal with life the way that they're going to have to deal with life. It's why I think a lot of kids often look for some kind of escape, no matter what that escape is, whether it's drugs, whether it's all kinds of deviant behavior or whatever. They look for that escape because they've not been equipped to deal with the harsh realities of life. And I think we've missed that because the pendulum always swings, right? One generation will be super fucking hard and they'll beat the shit out of their kids. And that's not good either, right? But then the pendulum always swings the other way where nobody wants to do anything. You can't spank your kids. You can't reprimand them. They get to have all the choices. And I don't think that is healthy either. I think that there has to be a medium in there somewhere where, kids are getting instruction and they're getting stern instruction because that is important for development. Because like I said, nobody's going to care what your story is. All they care about is if you're productive and you get your shit done. That's it.
Yeah. And like I gotta be honest, because I work at a grocery store. I'm a sushi chef at a grocery store, and it always annoys me when because obviously I daydream during work and I see hundreds of customers a day, and it always annoys me when I don't see, because when I was growing up with my mom, like if I fucked up or if I was being a dickhead in the grocery store, she'll give me that look like I'm gonna kill you when I get home. And I was like, oh shit. And but you don't see that anymore in parenting today. Kids will act up and the parents will just be like, oh, come on, let's go. like very rarely do you see that death stare. Like, I'm gonna fuck you up. It's like, and I miss that. I miss that fear into kids that I used to have, or my siblings.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's an important thing, and I think and eventually the pendulum will swing back. There'll be more of that, because what happens with people is we're very generational, right? One generation will do something and it'll be too strict, and then the next generation will be a little less strict, and then the next generation will be completely lax, right? And so eventually, once you get to that generation that's completely lax, which is about right where we're at now, eventually people are like, Jesus Christ, that's terrible. And then it starts swinging the other way, and people start doing more and more. Now, what is difficult is, in our society, or at least here in the United States, the laws are such that parents have a very limited capacity on what they can do. And kids have so many rights that parents don't have. It makes it very, very difficult to parent effectively, and it shows in our society, right? So, take that for what it is.
No, if I can, I love how we're on the same page with a lot of things. It's good to just be, and you were saying earlier about how you might get canceled for saying whatever it is you said. That's why I love my platform. That's why I call myself the Serpent Tongue, because I'll let people say whatever, I say whatever, and it's like, go for gold. Fuck it. Like, to me, just be honest, say whatever it is, controversial or otherwise. I never hold my tongue. And it's a nickname that just stuck. So on that topic, I thought of something cool, a little game we could play, a game suited for just the both of us. And hopefully you have the balls to participate. I think you will. Because it is a serial killer theme. So I want to know, if there has to be one famous celebrity that you would happily kill, who would it be?
Tom Cruise.
Why?
I think that Scientology is really, really whacked out. So, and I don't know. He's the first person that came to mind. I really love him as an actor. I think his belief system is really fucked up. So,
I was gonna say you're taking Mission Impossible from us. What is this?
I know. He's a great actor, though. Man, I love the new Top Gun. God, he was so good in that. That was
and
probably
kill him.
I know. Next to oh, you know what? Maybe I'll retract that. Maybe Tom Cruise could stay, and we could get rid of what's his name? Oh shit, I can't think of his name right now. The pedophile guy that was in The Usual Suspects, and he did the pedophile movie. What the hell was that called now? Oh my God, I can't think of the name of the movie. I was just talking about it this weekend. Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, I was thinking about him. Yeah, Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, that guy, he could go for sure. Like, we'd get rid of him. I just, that's something that is, I don't know, all the conspiracies again and all that shit about, Hollywood and everything. I don't know how true all that is. I don't think there's any like huge pedophilia ring. I don't know that I believe any of that shit. However, I do think it's really weird. And I remember when, what is it? A beautiful something. Anyway, that movie, when it came out and it won Best Picture and everything, and everybody was raving about it, I remember watching it and thinking, God, this movie is really fucked up. Mm. And like it won Best Picture, and the guy is just lusting after this like underage girl the whole movie. Like, this isn't okay. Like, who the fuck thinks this is okay? Mm. And I was watching that and I'm like, dude, this is really weird. And then of course, 10 years goes by and we find out that Kevin Spacey actually is a pedophile. And it's like, well, that brought a whole lot more meaning to that movie, right? And it's like, Jesus Christ, like, it's crazy. So who knows? Who the hell thought that Bill Cosby would be drugging women? And why? When it comes to things like that, what I don't understand is why would you need to? You're Bill Cosby, right?
Yeah.
You're like the funniest guy on the planet at the time. Like women are throwing themselves at you. But I guess when you start looking at psychology and you look at people like Dahmer, or even a better example of that is Dennis Nielsen, right? He had a real serious thing for unconscious people. So like, if you need to get them unconscious first, the only way you can really do that is to drug them. So, I don't know if that was Bill's thing or what, but I've never personally had a thing for unconscious people. I've never had a thing for drunk women. It fucking drives me crazy. I don't want to talk to them because I'm like, if you can't remember what we're getting ready to do, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I at least want to be memorable. Fuck.
For me, it's easy. James Gordon. Corden, is that his name? The fucking host, the annoying gay, presumably gay. He was the guy for the Friends reunion. Fucked up the Friends reunion.
Okay.
James Gordon, I think his name. I cannot stand him. He's so annoying. Everything he touches turns to shit. And I was like, dude, if it was legal for one day, I would fucking just end him.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch. I'm going to have to go back and watch that Friends reunion now.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the best reunion anyway, but he ruined it. He definitely rock bottomed it because I don't know everything.
Wow.
He has an annoying voice, an annoying presence, and I'm like, you know what? The world would be better without you. And I think I can find a lot of people that agree. But speaking about Bill Cosby, I find that always interesting because look, firstly, and we're going to make a lot of controversial comments today, apparently. But for me, I still find it hard to believe because, like, as in, I don't believe, and like, it's like I'm not denying the fucking thousands of women that came forward, but it's just that I find it hard to believe, and a few reasons why. But one of the main reasons, and I know this is probably a stupid reason or stupid evidence to bring up, but do you remember the Eddie Murphy stand-up comedy, Raw? Have you ever seen that? Yeah.
Oh,
and he
I love
talks
it.
about the phone call he made with Bill Cosby, and how Bill Cosby cracked it at him for being inappropriate, for swearing and sexual language. And I'm thinking to myself, if that was a true phone call, it doesn't add up. Like because he was explaining like how he's such a family man, he hates cursing, his son should never have been exposed to all that, but then he did all this. I'm like, there's that. I don't know. Like, a little bit of information really gets to my head because I'm like, and plus, like a lot of comedians I've seen interviews, they're like, he was a family man. Why were these women coming up to him in the first place? They knew he was the family guy, man. And look, like I'm not here to say it's the victim's fault. And obviously he's probably guilty. But it's weird because his cadence in jail, he's nice. He's thanking people for their support or whoever does support him. He's thanking. It's like, this is not like, he's so old. Like you'd think at his age, at his point in life, if he did, like, I don't know, to me, he doesn't show any signals. Because in my head, his age, like, after finding guilty, I would expect him to be like, all right, fuck it, I did it. But no, even in his old dying age, because he's like sick and everything, he's still been very nice. He's still been very understanding. And I'm like, his attitude and his cadence doesn't add up to the actions he's being charged for. And that's just me. Like, I just find him specifically, I just find it very, very hard to believe. And I'm still trying to get my head around it.
So, you bring up that part of it, and it makes me think of, currently, of course, Marilyn Manson is getting a lot of shit right now because of, how he's treated some of his girlfriends and stuff like that, and other people. And he's another one that I don't disagree that he did things. And I think he does a lot of really fucked up things. But at the same time, there are women throwing themselves at him all the time. He has money, and he is clearly into a lot of really deviant sexual practices, right? And so if that's the case, and you know that you're getting involved with somebody that very, very publicly lives that lifestyle, you know what the fuck you're getting into when you start it. And then you add that with a bunch of drugs that you guys are doing all the time and drinking all the time, shit is bound to go off the rails. So then the question is, at that point, when everyone is impaired, who is at fault, right? Is it the person that's committing the acts? Is it the person that's placed themselves in this environment? And again, that is not, I don't think it's the victim's fault. And I think he definitely entrapped people and wouldn't let them leave and stuff like that. I think that really happened. But I also believe that a lot of them were super cool with that at first until they weren't cool with it anymore. Yeah. And so, you know, it's like, what are you willing to do? Like if any number of like super hot, like movie stars were like, hey, Jeff, you know, I might be willing to do all kinds of wild shit. And then maybe later on I wouldn't be, you know, who knows? It's a crazy, crazy world we live in. And I think that, you know, I think it's really difficult to judge in those situations when we're not the one in the situation. So, you know,
that Marilyn Manson thing, it always gets me because it's fun. Like, I'm picturing in my head, I'm picturing a woman attending a Marilyn Manson concert, right? He's up there. He's like, I am the Antichrist. He's burning Bibles. He's fucking, I am the devil, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, in my head, I'm like, I'm picturing a woman. Is she up there looking at this beast and going, oh, he's a gentleman? What are you fucking expecting in this dude? And obviously that doesn't mean if he's doing, because obviously, you know, sexual stuff can get very out of hand very quickly, especially when there's probably that master slave dynamic. Famous Manson, diehard fan. So I can definitely see how that would get out of hand very quickly if she's too scared to say no and he doesn't know, and then he's like, oh shit, she doesn't mind this, let's try it. So I can understand the escalation. But at the same time, like as I just said, it's like, how do you listen to his music, see him in interviews, see him live if you do, see everything he does, and then go, oh, that seems stable? Like, what are they not seeing that the rest of the world, or at least most of us, see? Like, what's the...
Well, that's the thing. Most of us, as human beings, are often blind to the truth in front of us, right? We want so badly to be part of something that is beyond us. And so they want to attach themselves to that, but are never prepared for what that really costs. And I think that that's where it becomes hairy, because, you know, when you have somebody that is so separated, just like, you know, we have sports stars and athletes and, you know, musicians and stuff, that they don't live in the same fucking reality that we live in, right? Yeah. Like, I can't go out tomorrow and buy a Maserati and not even think twice about it, right? And spend, you know, $70,000 to take a plane ride with all my friends to Europe and spend a week over there. Like, I can't afford to do shit like that. They can. So their lifestyle is just so completely drastically different. Their relationship with people is so drastically different. And then you have this idea of all of these people being throwing themselves at them and being willing to do anything. All of these like roadies and shit like that. What do they call those people? I can't think of the name of it now. But anyway, there's a certain name for it. Oh, groupies, right? Yeah. They've got all these groupies and these fans that are chasing them down, offering them all these things. And I think for them, it's very easy, again, to disassociate and not treat those people as human, right? Because they are, in their own mind, often very narcissistic themselves, and they feel like they're God, right? Because they can do whatever the fuck they want. And so I think a lot of that with some of these actors and stuff like that, I think they are built up to believe that. And then when all of these accusations and stuff come out, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? when in truth they're abusing people all the time. They just don't understand it because they've been so set apart from culture. They've been so set apart as people that they really believe the hype, and they believe that they're not human anymore, that they're superhuman, that they can do whatever and nobody will ever be able to touch them. And then we watch these heroes that we have that we don't even know these fucking people, right? We watch a movie and we watch their portrayal of a character in a movie and we think that that's who they are, but that's not who they are at all, right? They're somebody completely different. And so it's always fascinating to me that we get this idea that, you know, because they played a character, that that's them personally, and it's not at all. One of the things that I've always strived for is to be as authentic as possible. Like who I am to you is exactly who I am to everybody else. It's just who I am. Like, I don't pull any punches. I fucking grew up on the East Coast. I will tell you exactly what I'm thinking, whether you like it or not. So, you know, it's just my personality. But I've always found that to be much better than getting really, really full of myself. Right. Yeah. Even though I've had my moments, like, you know, when I was in high school, I was really fucking full of myself.
You know, and I think it's that personality why I knew that coming on video together that we would click. You know, I mean, we've already talked a bit on Messenger, so I already knew that connection was there, and I knew, like, and you know, and you diving into yourself just confirmed that much more, that we're on the same mindset, as in saying what we think, being the same around the same people. And, you know, sometimes that might fuck people over. Sometimes they might get offended. Sometimes this or that. But it's about being your true self. And that's the one thing we both share.
Yeah, well, and I think with that, I think it's interesting because for me as a person, I'm always open to anything. Like, I'll listen to anybody, whatever they have to say. I don't have to agree with it, right? To hear what they have to say. And to be interested in what they're saying, especially if they're very passionate about it, if they really believe it. I have friends that are really, really conservative. I have friends that are very, very liberal. And so, like, to me, it's all about, like, who you are as a person, right? It's who you are. I don't give a fuck what your politics are. I'm very much a centrist, and I believe that a lot of people are right. I don't believe that anybody has the ultimate truth, whether it's on the right or on the left. I think that somewhere in the middle is important. And I think that, you know, if we can come together and value each other and value people as human beings and value their belief systems and understand them, that then we're really at a good place.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you froze.
Oh, well, you froze on my end. Oh, no, here you are. You're back.
Oh, okay. I was like,
oh no, towards the very end. No, you're completely right. And yeah, you know, everyone can. Yeah, it doesn't mean we can't get along just because we have different opinions. I have a very strong opinion, which I will tell you on Messenger, because like, it's probably not best to end this video with what I'll tell you on Messenger. But on that note, before we wrap things up, is there any chance that you could record like a quick, like, 1 minute whatever promotional video for your Killers card game, so I can add it onto every SAGAS episode as like a?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just like a quick. Yeah, actually, what all about. Yeah.
What I'll do? Yeah, I can do that. I've got a few things going on. I've got a. So, like I mentioned earlier, Mass Murderers is going to drop on Kickstarter on August 1st. And I have a buddy of mine who is doing an animation for me for the Kickstarter video. Nice. And it is done in South Park style. And of course, it's Mass Murderers. So the opening scene is like James Bond, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to open up with that. It's going to open up with the explosion and the mushroom cloud and everything. But then the very first scene in the video is Adolf Hitler, and he is saying, and I do the voiceover for the whole thing, right? So it's Adolf Hitler saying nine, nine, and then Ted Bundy coming and killing him. So so it's the kind of the whole premise for the expansion is that the mass murderers are the victims and the killers are going to be like secret agents, kind of like the U.S. government, the CIA, was using the mafia to try to kill Fidel Castro down in Cuba. We're going to have the same kind of feel in the mass murderers expansion. So the killers are going to have to kill the mass murderers before the mass murderers kill everybody else. So, we've got, and that's going to have like, all of the despots and stuff are going to be in there, Osama bin Laden, everybody. We're also going to have like the school shooters and mass murderers in there. So there's going to be a lot of people, like you mentioned, Columbine, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold are both in there. The Pulse nightclub shooter is in there. So, and it's really funny because the Pulse nightclub shooter is Omar Mateen, I believe is his name. But Omar, I put this in after listening to his story. And so if he, if he rolls something, I can't remember what it is now, but he can roll a certain combination and he realizes that he's gay and then he can no longer kill anybody anymore. So like one of the things is, he went to Pulse and he shot all of those people. He was a regular attendee at Pulse nightclub. He would go there and pick up men, but he was another one, kind of like, like several of the very self-loathing bisexual men who don't want to admit that they are actually have feelings towards other men. And they believe that that's one of the reasons why he killed all the people there. So it's like, I wanted to add that in there to make that a possibility, because maybe if he would have realized early enough that he was actually gay, maybe he could have had a very fulfilling life and not have gone in there and killed everybody, and he would have found his tribe instead. So never know.
That reminds me. Do you remember? This still cracks me up. When Donald Trump owned the whole LGBT or whatever community, he's like when he where he's like, you do realize bi means two genders. And I was like, damn, he owned everyone, because it's in there, LGB, and he's like, that means two genders. It was funny. It just came to my head. You said bi and people gay. So you have that going on, and you also work with our good friend John Sorrell. Little partnership with him. Sorrell. Molgrot. So, which I have the first ever SAGAS edition. So hard to see. Molgrot.
Nice.
Yeah,
I love it.
Me on the cover.
Nice.
So it is a good friend of ours. So it's cool that you work with him as well. So
it's funny. We ended up we connected because of an ad that he ran on Facebook. And so Morgrot magazine, because of all of the stuff that I'm in, popped up. And I thought, let me send him a message. So I sent John a message and I was like, hey, I'd love to be part of the magazine in some way. Maybe I can make a card for you guys. You guys are already offering like the disc in there and everything. And I'll just make a card that can have like something related to music or heavy metal or whatever. And we'll put it in there and people could use it as a playable card in the game, or they could just collect them or whatever. So we've done Manson, and you have the Manson card.
Yep.
And then for this next issue that's coming out, the guy who's on the cover is, I can't think of what his name is now.
Some Spanish dude, isn't it?
It
was like maybe some long name, I think. Yeah. I remember John telling me.
Yeah, we did a card of him, and it's super, super cool. He was super excited to get it. And so he's got his now, I think. And I don't know why I'm saying that. Hold on. I have it right here.
Nice.
I forgot. It's right on the other side, but it's Reaper's Underground. Let's see if anybody can see that.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's the
Love that
card.
look.
So on the back of it, it says you can't kill the Reaper. But he's got a little bit of a bio on the back, and he has a special ability. So if he takes victims, he also gets a soul token. And then he can use 5 soul tokens to resurrect himself.
Wow.
So you can't kill the Reaper for real.
You can't fuck with the Reaper.
That's it.
Well, look, to all the listeners out there for the SAGAS Metal Podcast, definitely obviously check out Morgrot, but more especially, which is on your table, the Killers card game, which we've been talking about. Go get yourself one. I have one myself. It is a very fun board game, and there's a QR code to show the gameplay. So that's always good, very convenient. Obviously, if you're into the shit that we're just talking about, you probably, if you're not, you probably tuned out a long time ago. But if you're still here, go check it out. It's a fun game for people who have a sick, twisted mind like the both of us. And hopefully, my goal is that hopefully the sales will increase once your board game gets to the Little Stinkers podcast. Because if I got mine, they should have got theirs. Like, I have to contact them, but because that's a serial killer podcast. So hopefully that explodes. And like anyone I've told this about, my family, cousins who are into serial killers, they're blown away by the card game as well. So to all the listeners, viewers, go check it out. I'll put up a link that Jeff can give me later on. I'll edit it into the video to where to buy it. And this has been a very it's so good to just open up and talk to someone about serial killers. It's a very niche market. I can't do that with a lot of people, so it's very fun that I got to do that with you. So thank you for sharing all your
stuff. Absolutely, man. It's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And this will be uploaded by tomorrow. Wednesdays is my SAGAS week. So you're my very, very fun last minute guest. I couldn't find anyone for ages. And I'm like, look, I need someone. And I was like, oh, Jeff, he's the perfect guest. So I asked you, and thankfully we can make this work very quickly. And I'm very
nice. That's awesome. No, I appreciate it, man. I love it. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to come down that way. So there's a possibility. I would love to go down to Australia, man. It's friggin' incredible. And
I know
there are a lot. Yeah, there are a lot of true crime fans down there. I've sold a bunch of units down there, and like I got people that like go and buy my T-shirts and shit. I just sold one in Switzerland the other day. So who knows? Things get everywhere.
Exactly, and obviously, if you come to Australia, you gotta let me know because. Like, I know there's a lot of exhibitions and, different kind of exhibits and exhibitions going on in Australia. Like, I used to go to a lot of tattoo expos, and they were super fun. So, yeah, I know there's definitely a market for it. And, yeah, like I said, if you ever come down there, you got to let me know so that we can chat in person at the actual expo. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you again. And obviously, tomorrow, once it's uploaded, I'll send you a link to everything, and we can go from there.
Sweet. Sounds great, man.
All right. Thank you again for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Absolutely. You too, man. Great to actually talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. You too. All right. Have a good one.